Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Sergeant Major of the Army's Professional Development Forum titled The Theater Army. I'm Dan Daly, Sergeant Major of the Army, retired. As a reminder, please turn off or silence all cell phones. So let me begin by welcoming our distinguished guests, beginning with our host for today, the 17th Sergeant Major of the Army, Sergeant Major of the Army Michael R. Weimer. We have a few of our former Sergeant Majors of the Army in the room joining us today. Let's give them a round of applause. The Sergeant Major of the United States Army Reserve, Command Sergeant Major Betty. Where's Sergeant Major Betty? There he is. The Sergeant Major of the Army National Guard, Command Sergeant Major John T. Raines. Now, right before I walked up here, the Sergeant Major of the Army said, hey, SMA, we have a special announcement to release today, and I would like you to release it. Command Sergeant Major John T. Raines has done an outstanding job leading the National Guard of our nation for the last several years. And today it was released that he will become the National Guard Bureau Command Sergeant Major. Let's give him a real big round of applause. It's like all State Sergeant Major, we're in good hands. We're in good hands. Congratulations. A special thank you to our silver sponsor for all NCO events at the annual meeting, Jonathan Engineering Solutions. I'd also like to recognize our bronze level sponsor, Columbia Southern University and Ecolog, for all their support for this event and our soldiers and their families. Please join me in a round of applause for our sponsors. Today is the final NCO and Soldier Programs event, and the theme of this year's panel is the Theater Army. To introduce the panel, I'd like to give the floor over to the 17th Sergeant Major of the Army, SMA Michael Weimer.
Thanks, Dan. Perfect.
China's multi-pronged assault on our national and economic security make it the defining threat of our generation.
Comes just as Russia launched another round of ground and air attacks on northern Kharkiv this morning.
Korea claims it has carried out a successful test of an underwater nuclear-capable drone. It's raising fears that the North may be planning to take advantage of conflicts in other parts of the world to launch a war of its own.
And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for. Who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if he knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We've seen war. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Good morning. We changed this year up a little bit. Still the professional forum, but this year we're going to focus and reset, calibrate our compass, use whatever analogy you want to use on why we exist. And so the Theater Army was very intentional. We exist to fight and win. Now there's a lot of other things that fall underneath that, but I think we get really focused on all those other things and it quickly derails of why you're wearing that uniform right now sitting in this forum. And so this year is an attempt from the Senior Enlisted Council and myself to use this short block. It's not a long block. There'll be a little bit of Q&A, but it won't be a ton. But it's an opportunity for us when we come to the annual meeting to get our mind right and get back to why we exist. Make sense? All right. I know I'll get some feedback. There's no shortage of that. Prefer not anonymous, but I want you to know your Senior Enlisted Council is listening. It really is. Okay? So today, you're going to hear from some different people that you haven't heard from before. There's a reason why FORSCOM and TRADOC aren't going to be up here today. It's because you heard from FORSCOM and TRADOC and our G1 team who's here in the room. I see John, I see Smoke, I see Rob, I see KG. You heard from them yesterday. Very intentional, right? And they went first. But today, you're going to hear from that group of distinguished leaders who really own and support the Theater Army fight in support of CSM Abernathy. Where are you at? CSM Abernathy, the COCOM. We fight and win joint. I'll say it again. We fight and win our wars joint. And then I will add to every one of our partners that's inside the room, we do that with you. And we have never in our history not done it with you. And so we're going to pivot this year. And that's who's going to come up on stage and talk to you. But it's all going to be about how we're supporting the Theater Army to make sure that COCOM is ready to do what we pray we never have to do. It's so lethal that it actually deters an adversary from wanting to go from competition to crisis to conflict. It is that important. Our audio and video has to match. And so today's also an opportunity to spread, because again, this will be watched in a lot of different places for many months. We've pivoted from the global war on terror to large-scale combat operations in the Army. But we're still have to over-communicate. There's still some folks that don't even know what that means. If you served in the Army before 9/11, raise your hand. There's a reason why this room full of senior leaders. We're talking to ourselves a bit, and we got to go on a campaign to talk to the soldiers that this room would be filled with if they were in your formations that don't even know what I'm talking about right now. And so this is an effort to do some of that. What does it mean to prepare for large-scale combat operations? Best squad, up in the front row. Stand up real quick. You're going to hear a lot today about the Theater Army, COCOM Theater Army, and how we're going to fight the corps and divisions inside those formations. But it still always starts with that. That's where being at the brilliance, being brilliant at the basics starts, is right there. But now we've got to learn how to fight above the BCT. You heard some of that from CSM Holland yesterday and what it means for FORSCOM's responsibility to train the force and be able to get in the dirt. That division in the dirt piece yesterday, I hope you caught on to that. You're going to hear a lot more about that. All right. Okay. So I want to introduce Roger. Come on up here. Roger Mansker. I wanted to make sure folks actually know who this mythical Roger Mansker is outside the Senior Enlisted Council. And so Roger's going to actually introduce the panel, because I think it's important for Roger to introduce who's coming up here. But Roger is basically our strategic initiatives director for the Senior Enlisted Council. Now, he works directly in my office, but I think it's important that folks actually know what he does for you and for the Army. And, you know, he happened to have been one of us. Still is. He's just in a different uniform right now. And so, Roger, get us started.
Good. Thanks, Esma. I think you forgot to say I look much younger, Esma. All right. First of all, good morning to you. As the panel members come up here, I'll introduce each one of them, so if you don't know who they are, you will know. Just for understanding, if you have a question for the panel, it will happen at the end of the panel. Raise your hand. There's runners going around that have cards for you. They'll bring them up to me, and I'll bring them into the panel members. There's also stand-up mics over here. So without further ado, first up on the panel is Sergeant Major Jason Schmidt, United States Army Pacific. You get no cheers out there. Sergeant Major Jeremiah Inman, U.S. Army Europe and Africa. There we go. Sergeant Major Joanne Noman, U.S. Army Special Operations Command. I don't know if I'm not changing your job title yet, John. Sergeant Major John Raines, Army National Guard.
Come on, guard.
And Sergeant Major Gregory Betty, United States Army Reserves. Jason, it's over to you.
Okay, so hey, thanks, Roger, for the introduction, and SMA for the time for allowing me to talk about the Theater Army for the Indo-PACOM region. You'll often hear my boss, General Flynn, say land power is decisive. It's especially decisive in our region because most of the Indo-PACOM region is made up of land power. We are the land power that plugs into Admiral Paparo's all-domain power for the Indo-Pacific region. USRPAC is focused on three ways that they do that. We do this through warfighting, campaigning, and wargaming, right? And the four means in which we do that, we organize the forces that we have. They are organic. They are not GIF map, they are GIF MIG. We generate readiness. That readiness is generated through our JPMRC at 3 campuses, Joint Base Lewis McChord, Hawaii, and Alaska. We apply that readiness in theater through our pathways exercises. There's 40 different exercises we execute throughout the year, and that builds our joint interior lines. Those joint interior lines are very important because if you hear my boss speak, he'll tell you we are out of position. We seek to counter China's 3 main threats or advantages over us, which is a bigger army, bigger magazine depth, and they have positional advantage, or they have the lines of communication already there. That's what the organize, generate, apply, and build allows us to do for that. So Operation Pathways, the first bullet you see up there, you see it's about 45 exercises synchronized throughout the year. They are joint and combined exercises within the region. Another initiative that we're working on is the theater fires and theater information element. So the theater fires element allows us lethal and non-lethal fires in competition, crisis, and conflict. And the triad is inform, influence, enable, protect, and attack. Another key document that was released this year when my boss put out the Theater Army Strategy, and if anybody's looking for a copy of that, Sergeant Poole has one in the back, is our Enlisted Leader Development Strategy. The Enlisted Leader Development Strategy complements my boss's Theater Army Strategy as we look to build 2 types of interoperability. The commanders already bake in the interoperability at the tactical level throughout those 40-some exercises a year. Where we seek on that strategy to capitalize even further is the intellectual interoperability, or the professionalization of our partner nations' forces, and that's by invitation, with their consent, and at their pace. And then we use what's called the ADDI process, and many are familiar with it. It's an old Trudosian trick where we analyze, develop, design, integrate, and evaluate, and then offer them suggestions to do that. So that enlisted leader development strategy is another way that we look to build interoperability through professionalization that goes on. We are involved in transformation and contact. Our 2nd Brigade of the 25th Infantry Division has transformed into 4 battalions, 3 infantry battalions with organic reconnaissance, and then a sustainment battalion. So again, as we seek to help the Army transform, we're a key part of that with our light infantry brigades out in the Pacific. Now, JPMRC, we kind of talked about the importance of those and how we do that. Why JPMRC is vital for us in the Pacific is, first off, as you always hear when someone asks about it, cost savings, right? JPMRC allows us to train in the environments that we operate in, from some of the most arduous environments, if you take where the 11th Airborne is in the Arctic, out to the hottest out in Kwajalein Atoll. So it allows us to train where we're at. It's exportable, so we can train our host nation partners and our allies, and also the Joint Force can play in it too. It's also live, virtual, and constructive, and we can use wraparound sim to help complement that exercise as we go along. Currently, we have JPMRC 2501. If you notice 25th Infantry Division's not here, that's because they're out executing that. And if I read this briefly, there's a battalion from the 11th Airborne that jumped in and conducted an airhead seizure at Pohakalua training area in Hawaii. A battalion from Taiwan, a battalion from Taipan, 275, our special ops partners were in there. 2 companies from our multinational partners from Indonesia, Maldives. We had a Pacific Fleet destroyer and 17 C-17 aircrafts from Pacific Air Force, or PACAF, supporting the JPMRC. So that's just kind of the wave tops of what we got going on across the Indo-PACOM, and what we do in support of Admiral Paparo and Fleet ISOM, and how we plug in as land power being decisive for the Joint Force. I look forward to your questions.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Am I good? Is my mic working? Good to go? Sound like Miss South Carolina, right? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeremiah Inman, the Command Sergeant Major for U.S. Army Europe and Africa. I'm going to take a few moments to embrace technology, right? And also talk about Europe, Africa, and Russia. Your U.S. Army Europe and Africa is supporting EUCOM, AFRICOM, CENTCOM, PACOM, NATO, and the Ukraine fight. Our area of responsibility covers 103 of the 193 recognized countries, 2.4 billion people, 30% of the Earth's land mass. We are 10 garrisons spread out over 100 different locations. In Europe, the Joint Multinational Readiness Center is the epicenter for building brigade readiness, not only for U.S. CTC rotations, but multinational military exercises as well. We recently had 173rd execute Sabre Junction, partner nations from Italy, United Kingdom, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Georgia, Romania, Lithuania, and Albania, all undersigned under a division multinational HICON. Aviation support was from 5th Corps 12th Cab and the 4th Army Air Corps, United Kingdom. JMRC has increased UAS involvement by 300%, including live jamming. To introduce rigor and privation, we have extended the defense from 36 to 48 hours and added permanent obstacles to replicate the depth and deliberate nature of Russian defensive lines. Talk about tyranny at distance. 3rd Brigade, 10th Mountain is spread out over 2,000 kilometers from Estonia to Bulgaria. In January, we will host 310 at JMRC for their transformation and contact. During Avenger Triad, we tested the new NATO battle plan for the defense of Europe. Our headquarters conducted the HICON of 5 NATO multinational corps and 5th Corps. Over 40 countries tested every aspect of LISCO, which immediately gave us lessons learned for training and real war operations for all NATO and troop contributing countries. We recently stood up the 68th Medical Theater Command, activated to synchronize medical operations, training, engagements, build partner capacity, and medical support across Europe and Africa. Just to stress the importance of training with partners before we fight, we recently hosted European Best Sniper. The 3rd place team was a staff sergeant from 2CR and a Finnish sergeant who linked up on day 0 of the competition. And one of the only teams that actually hit a target out of a helicopter. Across Europe and Africa, we have exceeded our retention mission. You're welcome. And we've also exceeded the recruitment mission that was directed from. There are 28 Europeans this year going through the U.S. Army Sergeant Major's Academy. In Africa, you have about 2,500 soldiers deployed, supporting 4 operations, 9 theater security cooperation agreements in 10 different African countries. We recently hosted African Land Forces Symposium in Zambia. I think Sergeant Major Nande, I think he's the only African CSEL here, so if you have a chance to run into him, I encourage you to do so. When I hosted ALFs in 2018 in Nigeria, I had 9 African partners show up. When Reese did it in Zambia a couple of months ago, he had 26 African nation CSELs show up. Over 300 participants from 50 different countries, and the president of Zambia showed up to give remarks. He talked about the importance of partnership. During Arcane Thunder, 56 fires and 2nd MDTF executed high payoff training covering space, cyber, maritime, air, and land domains across Europe, Africa, and the US, alongside our Moroccan partners and the Fort Huachuca Range and Space Expeditionary Cyber Team. The training allowed for real-time long-range sensing against realistic targets emitters and built partner capacity and trust with our allies. We have just codified our enlisted development strategy for AFRICOM. There are 13 African partners attending the Sergeant Major's Academy. Finally, the bear in your yard or the bear in the woods? Why Russia is still a credible threat. The Ukraine fight did not start in February 22. It started in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. The current war favors Russia. Mass over maneuver, quantity over quality, brutality over precision, and capability over capacity. They have massive stockpiles of outdated equipment that is still very effective on the battlefield. Russia has troops in Georgia, Moldova, Armenia, and numerous countries across the continent. Like the battle for Stalingrad, they have demonstrated they are willing to take massive casualties to achieve their goals. Early on, they demonstrated the ability to mass 300,000 soldiers in 90 days, including foreign fighters. They are 1/3 larger now than they were in 2022. Their doctrines and tactics are antiquated, but they are learning. Learning slow, but they are learning. They have developed sophisticated TTPs for targeting, employment, and battle damage assessment, highly effective counter-battery fires, created a joint fires organization around the Army Artillery Group, mobilized and deployed the industrial military complex, embraced commercial off-the-shelf equipment, especially UAS, and mobilized the Russian society to fill the gaps that the Ministry of Defense cannot. One article reads that it'll take major European countries 100 years to again become a near peer with Russia. If you want to know more about the Eastern flank, talk to Phil Blaisdell or Eric Bohannon. More about Africa, talk to Reese Tickle. And more about the Ukraine, talk to Mark Morgan. Thank you. I made it. I made it.
You nailed that, Jeremiah. Right on time.
All right. All right, good morning. Sergeant Major Joanne Nauman, U.S. Army Special Operations Command. So I'm going to change it a little bit and talk specifically about Transform and Contact and what USASOC is doing in support of the theater armies. If you look at the history of warfare, victory goes to the team that innovates and integrates technology faster and more effectively. And that is what RSOF is trying to do across the globe every single day. In RSOF, we say that innovation is a mindset, and that's represented on the slide by the black and white to color images that show some of the innovation that USASOC across our history has done in areas of communications, fires, teaming, aviation, and influence. We've actually stood up in the last couple of years the USASOC Force Modernization Center that works directly with Army Futures Command to innovate on long-term projects and to integrate technology into our formations and into the Army. And we're demonstrating that by participating in every single CTC rotation in some format, whether that's individual teams, whether that's participating in the OPFOR as we did this past September at JRTC, or whether that's actually sending an entire battalion of RSOF, as well as doing SOF-only rotations at the CTCs. We're also participating in Project Convergence. But more importantly, we are transforming in contact. And that is what we're showing. We have got over 3,000 soldiers deployed in over 80 countries. But today I'm specifically going to focus on what we're doing in Europe and then how we're transferring that into Indo-PACOM. And so in Europe right now, SOF has a very active irregular warfare campaign. We are working with partners from the Baltics to the Balkans, all across Europe. It's not focused solely on Ukraine. And those are generational relationships. Those are not relationships that we build at the point of conflict. Those are relationships that are ongoing 365 days a year, ready for us to partner with if conflict does come. But the focus right now in Europe, obviously, is the Ukraine and the conflict with Russia. And Ukraine has become a battle lab. And that's how we are looking at it. There's innovation happening in Ukraine, not weekly, not monthly, but daily and even hourly. We're seeing things happen, and we're seeing overnight adjustments being made in TTPs, in new equipment that's being produced overnight. When we asked Ukraine, what's the number one thing we can do to help you? They asked for a 3D printer. Because that is how fast they're innovating. When they decide they want something new, they're going to make it tonight, and they're going to use it tomorrow. And that is where we need to be. The number one lesson that we are learning in Europe right now is the challenge of speed. And I would challenge everyone in this room, that's our responsibility as NCOs. It's not going to be senior leaders who are going to make things happen fast on the battlefield. It's our soldiers. And they've got the capability, and they've got the knowledge, and they can do it. They're smart enough to do it. We just need to empower them and to do that. Specifically in Ukraine, one of the biggest things we're seeing is advances in unmanned systems as well as counter-unmanned systems. We are learning from that every single day, and we are starting to deploy new systems into the theater to learn even more. We're also learning the importance of influence operations. I would argue that Ukraine doesn't exist as a country today if it were not for the power of influence operations. First, just Ukraine's ability to draw global support in on their side of this conflict, but also you see over a division's worth of Russian deserters with no cost of life simply because of influence operations. And all of these lessons we're taking and immediately applying to what we're doing in the Indo-Pacific. So similar to Europe, we have irregular campaigning going on every day in the Indo-Pacific across multiple countries, including Taiwan. We are deployed in Taiwan now. We are deployed across the Indo-Pacific. And we are taking those lessons and applying them to what we can do in the Indo-Pacific with a bigger problem. The Indo-Pacific is just bigger. And we will not have the lines of supply that we've got in Europe. And so we've got to get even smarter and even faster. SOF's value proposition in the Pacific is to be there ahead of time, to be advising our partners in those generational relationships, to be disrupting Chinese intentions in the Pacific, not at the time of conflict, but today and tomorrow. SOF also offers deep sensing capabilities, everything from technological solutions to simple old-fashioned solutions like balloons that we've been using since the Civil War, but we can use them in new ways now. And the deep sensing that our partners can do for us. Our partners are there every day. They live there. They see things. They understand the environment in different ways. We're also very involved in the Indo-Pacific, specifically in the C5 ISRT fight. How are we going to accomplish that? How are we going to communicate? And that's another lesson we're taking from Ukraine as we have to do remote advise and assist in Ukraine because we're not in the conflict. We will have to do the same thing in the Pacific. On the day that it goes down in the Pacific, we're going to fight with what we have there. And we are going to have to be able to communicate with our partners in the region and with the Taiwans. And we're doing that through the development of tactical networks that we're using in Ukraine and that we are currently deploying to Taiwan. And so across the world, we are continuing to innovate. We're continuing to support the theater armies in both Europe and in the Indo-Pacific, learning, getting faster. But I challenge all of you to continue to push your soldiers and your NCOs to take that step, to challenge the way that we're doing things, to be faster and to integrate technology faster. I look forward to your questions.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Hey, good morning. All right. Hey, SMA, thank you for acknowledging, me going in Dale. Thanks, SMA. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody's applause and recognition that, hey, I've signed on for 4 more years. So I appreciate that. And hey, I won't start without talking about that video. That video should have fired us up. Everybody get fired up by that video? We got a war fighter up there talking about what's going to happen if you test American resolve. So, man, that fired me up. So I hope I can get through my slides here. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my slides before I started. We kick them up to SMA. He reviews them. He kicked them back to me. So I don't know what he's saying about you guys, the audience. But he said, hey, less words, more pictures. So I don't know, SMA. I don't know. So I'm going to get to some pictures here in a little bit. But you might be asking, hey, what's the Army National Guard Sergeant Major doing sitting up here on stage? You know, what's he got to do with Theater Army? What's he got to do with USASOF? What's he got to do with those things? Well, it's simple. This is not your granddad's National Guard. It's not your granddad's Army National. It's not even your dad's Army National Guard. There's 430,000 Army National Guard soldiers and airmen spread all around the world. And they're operating in all of the competition continuum. The competition, crisis, and conflict. One of our largest supporting roles across combatant commands is the State Partnership Program. I could talk a lot about what the Army National Guard is doing to support the competition continuum, but I'm going to really talk about our State Partnership Program and our exercises today. This program is a theater security cooperation program with concurrence from the State Department, managed by the National Guard Bureau, and it's executed through our geographic combatant commanders and resourced through our 54 states, territories, and District of Columbia. The National Guard has 106 partner nations resourced, executing more than $52 million a year. So why I'm up on the stage with our Theater Army, I'll first talk about EUCOM and how we support EUCOM. In EUCOM, we partner with 27 countries. Last fiscal year, we executed over 500 mil-to-mil engagements and currently have over 600 soldiers deployed in support of ongoing invasion of Ukraine, supporting 5th Corps, AUSA, and EUCOM. The soldiers are forward deployed in Germany, Kosovo, Poland, Romania, Latvia, and Bosnia. We're also coming off several exercises that include Avenger Triad, Sabre Junction, to name a few, with over 596 events planned for fiscal year 25. Then I'll move on to the Pacific Theater. In Indo-PACOM, we partner with 17 countries. Last fiscal year, we executed over 100 mil-to-mil engagements and currently have over 150 soldiers deployed in support of the ongoing exercises and operations. The soldiers are forward deployed to Guam, Mongolia, the Philippines, and Taiwan. Our unique guard structure means that we aren't just providing deployed forces to Indo-PACOM, but we are actually what makes the United States an Indo-PACOM country, with Guam and Hawaii being more than forward stationed. The Indo-PACOM AOR is their home, and it gives us a distinct advantage in knowing the culture of the region, plus having over 4,200 soldiers and their combat equipment ready to respond in a moment's notice. We are also coming off several exercises that include Garuda Shield, Cartwheel, just to name a few, with over 184 events planned for fiscal year 25. Now I'll move on to my last topic, which is our support of Special Operations Forces in those same theaters. Our engagements support all of the Theater Army, and they're not just restricted to our conventional forces. They include both our Special Forces groups and our SODs in support of Army Special Operations Command, which include 19th and 20th Special Forces groups. And we are conducting exercises and operations in 17 countries in Europe and Indo-PACOM to have 2 mobilizations, and we have 2 mobilizations and deployments planned for fiscal year 25 in support of SOF operations. So I look forward to your questions as well, and hey, I'm excited to be here to talk to you today. Greg.
All right, congratulations on your new position, Sergeant Major. Great to be here. I'm CSM Betty, you're Army Reserve CSM, but we got to go through an intro because when you go out to different training exercises, or just take the expo to get your bibs to go to the Army 10 Mile, which is a phenomenal event that we just went through. There are no Army Reserve tents out there, so it's like we're the unforgotten force. So we're going to go through and tell you some of the capabilities before we get into to how we support the combatant commanders. So we're all 50 states, 5 territories, and about 20 time zones. So just think of Army Reserve Command. Let's say the 377th, we have, which is 34,000 soldiers, one of the largest in the DoD, right? That sergeant major or that commander can't just call a formation and they show up in the backyard or in a certain state. They're in about 34 different states, about 15 different time zones. Just think, even if he was to call a virtual formation, it would still be hard to get all his team members. So that's some of we don't call it struggles. That's some of the greatness of Compo 3, how we go about getting after business. And we're about 173,000 strong, all over the 50 states, the 5 territories. And we're in the communities. We're your family members, we're your neighbors, we're your doctors, we're your teachers, your police officers, and like me, your transportation workers. I work for the MTA in New York City, and I'm here on a 4-year tour as a Sergeant Major in the Army Reserve. When I go back to work. So that's the beauty of us. We bring that, just like Compo 2, we bring civilian skill set to the battlefield that's just not, that's value added. We have the 75th Innovation Command where we bring in those young studs or young studettes that have those skill sets that we need. Sometimes they get the reps and sets we get the reps and sets in the civilian world with those skill sets that you can't really get as a reservist or an M-Day soldier because we just can't. So we need our civilian skill set, and then we utilize it to enhance how to do some of the soft stuff, the secure stuff, the EW and things like that. So flexibility is one of the reasons why the Army Reserve is key. We can serve in our neighborhoods, or we can serve in any state, any territory that we feel like. And that way, it's a great flexibility. I live in New York. I've served in many different states outside of New York, and that's something that we bring to the table as Army Reservists. We do tough, realistic training so that when we are called upon, when Freedom 7 hits me up and say, hey, ACSM, we need some stuff, I can deliver combat-ready soldiers to him and say, this is what we have, get after it. So what slide are we on? We were expecting the slides in front of us. Instead, we have a countdown clock, letting us know that we have to stay on time. So on this slide, again, go back one slide. Yes, on this slide, we're 175,000 strong with 2,100 units that support the combatant commanders. We have soldiers deployed and attached throughout every one of these combatant commands. About 10,000 soldiers right now deployed supporting the combatant commanders. Compo 3, we participate in about 65 exercises throughout the theaters. So that shows that we're involved and we build readiness and we have that total Army concept that SMA speaks about on a regular basis. You speak to the SEAC, you're speaking about total force. This SMA speaks about total Army, and that's how we support getting after that. Next slide. So there's 2 combatant commands that we're really going to focus on. Not all of them. There's 2 it's EUCOM and INDOPACOM, right? In EUCOM, we provide at any time about 5,000 personnel in EUCOM for training and mobilization. So we stay in the area that we need to be in to train. And again, we're training with Compo 1 soldiers so that when it's time to fight and win America's war, it's not new to us. We're not, hey, what's up? We know each other. We know our battle rhythm. We know our reps and steps together so that when it's time to fight, we can go ahead and fight. We do have the 7th MSC that's stationed over there in Germany with 26 proficient and cohesive units of action in support of U.S. Army Europe, and it's directed by the 21st Sustainment. We provide mission command of joint security coordination centers in the joint secure area, integrated with NATO allies and partners to enhance interoperability and capability to win America's war. Next slide. And the second INDOPACOM provides about 4,000 personnel as theater enablers that provide key capabilities, maintain forward posture, and prepares the command and control Homeland Defense, DISCA, for just like and we also do that at a Homeland. We had the situation, the 2 hurricanes that we just went through. We had units from National Guard and from the reserve that went out into those neighborhoods and make sure our citizens realize that we're not just going overseas to fight, we're also help out the homeland to make sure that we have homeland defense. So for both theaters and the major initiative for Compo 3 to support and combat commanders, we focus on forward positioning of equipment and resources so that it's time to go. We're not packing up our trucks, our equipment, and everything else. We make sure we get out there and support and have equipment, soldiers, and everything that we need, forward support, so that when we go, we can fight and get ready to fight. As we said, my boss in his meeting, when you go, we go, because without it's a total army. We all fight together. So that's all I got. So looking forward to questions. Back to you, Mr. Masker.
Mr. Mansker.
Mr. Mansker.
I like that.
What'd you call me, Esme? What'd you call me earlier?
And
All right,
among other
if
things.
everybody give a round of applause. I tell you what, listen to the leaders talk up here, and the wealth of knowledge you can gain from them and the understanding of the environment that they're working within and the complexities within. There are some questions I have already, but a reminder, there's mics to the side, but if you would like to write the question down and hand it to one of the runners, just hold your hand up, they'll get it to you. So really, this is a generic question for this group here. All your mics are on, so be a little careful with what you're talking about. Leaders, how are you adapting your formations to meet the specific challenges that you're seeing within the theater or within your operational mission? Give them a second to think about that one.
I'll start.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, so we're doing a lot. You know, we are looking really hard at how we need to fight the next fight and completely adapting. So the first thing that we've already executed is that we no longer have special forces groups. We have SOF groups, Special Operations Forces groups. And what that did is it combined our special forces, civil affairs, and PSYOP capabilities that are regionally aligned under one umbrella so that we're achieving unity of effort across those three different functional areas to get after the mission in every combatant command. We're also looking at how do we better integrate technology into our formations. And so we're adding robotics into our 18 Bravo, our weapons sergeant course, so that we are looking at robotics as a weapon, unmanned systems as a weapon, and we are adding that into our weapons sergeant course so that we have that. We're also creating a technology directorate within each group so that they have the ability to both innovate and create new technology, but more importantly, having people there with the tactical force to integrate that technology into the tactical force. So, you know, we're completely re-looking how we do that. We are also looking at potentially is coding a language. Every Special Forces, CA, and PSYOP soldier is required to be certified on a foreign language, but we're considering giving the opportunity for them to be qualified in coding as their language.
Wow.
I'd like to go, Roger. So for us, just three things. We stood up SAGU, Security Assistance Group Ukraine, to really help the Ukrainians focus on man, train, equip, fund, and transportation of the presidential drawdown equipment that's going to them. We're also standing up a NATO-specific cell that'll be 90% Europeans, a few Americans within that cell, to also continue to assist with the donor nations and donor training that's going on with the Ukraine. And then every division and every brigade that comes over, they have their own little innovation cell. So they have troops that are reverse engineering UAS, different items, and making them on the battlefield to keep up with technology. Thanks, Roger.
Good.
And what we're looking at in USAPAC is kind of talked about earlier. We got the TIAD being built out, the theater fires element, multi-domain task force at JBLM. We're building out the MDTF in Hawaii as well, so that's continuing to grow. Transformation in contact with 225 is going on down there. 25th also has a Lightning Labs and Innovation Cell that they're using for that as well. So in the USAPAC, we're doing a lot to kind of keep up with technology and evolution.
Yeah, hey, Roger, I would say the thing that I see going on is not just in these two theaters, but we're getting a lot better as a total Army enterprise of taking lessons learned from like the CENTCOM theater and being able to take those lessons learned, bring them back into our innovation cells and develop new technology to counter those new emerging threats and then put them in the forces that are going forward. So I see that every day as we mobilize guardsmen, and I work with the Theater Army, I work with the First Army, and I work at putting real-time training and exercises, putting those capabilities in the hands of them on the next turn, and even sometimes while they're engaged and doing the transformation in contact.
So for us on the Compo 3 side, we're doing something called Mojave Falcon, where we're not just going to a particular area and do training there or do a war fighting there. We're spreading it across about 320 miles to see that we can exercise. Because in theater, if we have to get logistics to you, it's not just going to be in a small area. It's going to be things. So we're stretching our minds and capabilities. We have the technology. Why not use it before we need to use it to defend and fight? So we're going that route. And another thing for us is we have 39 days to do what we need to do. So it's something I want to bring up to the SMA. I brought it up to the SEAC where is, Private Betty back here in Desert Storm, if 39 days was okay for that fight, but the new fight is 39 days enough to get enough reps and set for us to be proficient in that MOS and task? Do we need to change the 39-day module to something else? Because it's been that way, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. It's not that for senior leadership. We got to put extra time in. But does the soldiers and do we need to increase that timer? And the last thing, once soldiers get to battle assembly or get to training sites, we need them, because we're citizen soldiers, right? We need them to flip the switch and get to being a soldier day one, hour one, minute one, second one, so that we don't waste any time, any of those 39 days, any hour, second, minute of it being still in the citizen mode. We got to switch to soldier mode. And one last thing, the best warrior, we got the best warriors. Is the next war going to need the strongest, the fastest, or are we going to need some more? So not you're not smart, but are we going to need some really smart people that do really smart things? So could we change some of the competitions that we have and focus not just on strength, and see if we could focus on some of the things that in the 75th world or the cyber world, things that they can do so that we know we know the resources we have out there. So some of the things that we're doing on the Compo 3. Over.
Okay, very good. Thank you. There's a follow-on question I guarantee is a little more difficult to talk about.
No math.
So the leaders in the room have heard all the complexity and the challenges in how you're transforming in contact and how it's supporting the theater armies and the COCOM commanders. They want to know how much of this do you think will stay in force structure and needs to be a force structure change, and what is your advice to the leaders in this room to make changes and how to push those changes up, whether it's to be a force structure change or a temporary solution?
I think force structure needs to change rapidly as the fight does, right?
Okay.
So the TDA I have on the ground right now doesn't make sense for the fight I'm in. So we need our headquarters to be more flexible when I want to keep somebody, or if I need to pull a specialty MOS over to support the fight. So I'd ask for that.
So Sergeant Major, you think that's a temporary or a structure change? That's the question really is for the audience as they see the transformation, the changes in the formation. As we all know, the force structure changes are coming, and we're adapting now.
It's both.
I concur.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess
Yes.
I think you keep the stuff that
Yes.
works, and then the stuff that doesn't work, commanders are obviously going to get feedback, and
We
that's
adapt.
going to adapt and evolve.
The
That's
incredible portion of what you just heard all of them just talk about is you have to push it forward to the decision makers to get it in the force structure change. You can't just discuss it and talk about it and continuously do it on the fly without structure, because eventually you run out of things. You can't do it anymore.
I would add, Roger, and I think Sergeant Major Schmidt started to hit on this. Like, we don't know exactly what the next conflict is going to look like. You never do. We can't actually predict the future. But the other thing we can't do is stay stuck, right? We can't say because we don't know the answer, we're just not going to try. And so what we need to be doing now is experimenting. We need to try new things, and that's some of what we're doing within SOF. Even with the force structure changes we're making, they don't look the same across all of our groups. We're letting each group kind of try different things, and we're seeing what works as we're deploying those new force structures, those new teams, how we're integrating the different MOSs. And then we'll see what works, and we'll stick with what works, and we'll get rid of what doesn't work. And I guarantee you, on day one of World War III, we're not going to have the perfect answer. We're going to have a good enough answer, and we're going to continue to make changes.
And hey, Roger, I would add that, when we look at things, we pride ourselves on looking just like the Army and the Army National Guard. Our force structure from division down looks just like the Army force structure. But I think that's some of the questions that we're asking ourselves now is, does the whole Army need to look the same? You know, maybe we need different capabilities in different places to counter different threats. And that's some of the things that I think our Army senior leaders are asking themselves on a daily, you know, hey, how do we get that right? And we don't know. There's some of it that's guesswork because we don't have the intelligence that we need. But there is a lot of it that is known by us being able to observe things that are going on around the world and seeing what our enemy's capabilities are. And then we just have to rely on our Army senior leaders, you know, to make those type decisions for us.
Yeah, thanks, Sergeant Major Raines. Sergeant Major Betty, for you, as you look at your formations for the sustainment arena, for first entry forces and stuff like that into theater, what do you see as force structure changes or possible changes that are required in the future in conjunction with AMC, obviously?
For us, we need to stay connected with the combat commanders and know exactly what's needed. To the question before, I think everything we do is a temporary permanent until we have to readjust to the fight. If we have to fight two near peers and simultaneously in two different theaters, how do we go about that? I do think we've learned a lot of lessons from the Russians where Compo 1 can't just go in. We more than likely need Compo 3 ahead of it to set up the sustainment piece of it. Liquid logistics is necessary, right? In all, we provide 100% of that in Compo 3. So we have to be pre-positioned in any of the theaters that we're going to fight in so that we can be there so we can continue to fight. Without us, you cannot continue to fight. And it's said over and over where, you know, it's a total army. So we just need to make sure that those combatant commanders reach out early, reach out frequently, and say, hey, these are the things we need and how we need them so that we can structure ourselves to best support the fight.
Okay, thanks, Sergeant Major. So SMA Weimer, when he first talked up here, he talked about interoperability and we don't fight alone. So the next question is on interoperability and opportunities to do interoperability on small scale, big scale. What's your coaching to the audience and to leaders in the group, how to capture those opportunities and make them worthwhile in there?
Well, I'll start from USRPAC. I'll tell you, don't miss any opportunity to build interoperability when you're out exercising. And again, I boil it down to two ways. You have both the tactical and the intellectual professionalization. But also capitalizing on that, ensure that you're not having fracturicide. The whole reason that we had to develop our strategy is we found a bad CrossFit workout going on across the Pacific. You had a whole bunch of people with the best of intentions, but nobody knew exactly who was doing what. You have state partnership programs. You got Compo 1 active out there. You got international partners. You got joint partners. And everybody wanted to have an effect. And in some cases, we were having a negative effect. And in some cases, we were telling them to do different things where those international partners really should be following the doctrine of the folks that were kind of taking them under their wing. So I say build it, and I think the tactical stuff for USRPAC's baked in, with those 40 exercises that go on. It's really the deconfliction of the intellectual, the professionalization aspect. Because if we don't wrap our arms around them and put Western ideals in it, then you're going to find Russian and Chinese fingerprints all over the place. So that's my stance on it.
Yeah, every CTC rotation we do, brigade CTC rotation we do at JMRC is multinational. There's between 3 and 10 different countries as part of that brigade or operating as the OP4. And then as you participate in the RAF, I really encourage you to get to know your partners now before we have to start the fight with them.
Yeah. Roger. Thanks. Anybody else? Nobody? All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and the next question is really to Sergeant Major Schmidt and Sergeant Major Inman, but I think Sergeant Major Nauman, you'll have something to go on this too. How are the theater armies using data and AI to enable command and control and better posture the theater to win the joint fight?
That's kind of like a math question. We said no math.
I don't want you to do math.
I got nothing.
You got nothing?
I got nothing.
Well, I don't know
we're
about...
learning a lot from the Russians, and as soon as we learn something, we work with call, we integrate it into our CTC rotations. We try to use certain things, kind of like JRTC and NTC. They've got their own networks. They got the ability to adjust the rotations going through, so we try to apply it in those realms.
And go ahead, John.
No, you do.
Okay.
I'll hit on it. I think that question could be an entire hour-and-a-half panel by itself. Like, data is just this ginormous topic that we could spend a lot of time talking about. But I think we have to integrate it into really everything we're doing. And so, I mean, like, yes, we have an AI directorate within our FMC at USASOC. We've got a chief data officer who are specifically looking at those problems. But it is everything from understanding our manpower and how we're utilizing our manpower and the readiness of our manpower. Like, just taking some of those tasks off of leaders so that leaders can focus on the things that only leaders can make decisions about it is critical, giving that time back to the force. But I think it's also, I mean, you look at open source intelligence, there is so much data in the world. The information available and how we can potentially use that information. And for better or for worse, because of the nature of their society, China's ahead of us on that. Because they don't have privacy. Right? Everything a Chinese citizen is producing in the internet space is being looked at by the Chinese government. And so we just need to think about it smarter, because we are not going to cross that line with our citizens, but we need to be able to do that. We cannot have a human looking at all of the information that is available. We need machine learning to screen that for us, provide the human with the information that they need to make decisions, and scale that down to something that's manageable. And if we are not utilizing all of the data that's available to us, we're going to be slower than our adversaries.
Thank you. And you actually opened up the next question, the follow-on question to that.
Yeah.
So you hear a lot of talk about data integration, data analytics, data understanding. How at your level do you ensure that the data is integrated but not burdened on the lower units, where they're overwhelmed with data and unable to perform the mission you have assigned them, and basically conflicts their ability to have priorities there?
I think from us, it comes from a data collection standpoint. We just ask a lot of times for too much stuff, or we ask for stuff we already have access for to get ourselves, and we need to constantly be on the lookout for that, so we're not overburdening a battalion level and below that do not have the staffs that we have at the higher headquarters level. Because that's what I see a lot in my formations, is that, hey, you can never satisfy, the thirst for that information at the higher headquarters level. And my old boss used to say, hey, there's two terrible headquarters in the Army, the one above you and the one below you. And that's where he was getting at there. It's that information thirst and being able to, quench that thirst. So I think we have to be on a constant lookout for that, make sure we're not overwhelming our subordinate commands.
And also with that, make sure that information, once we receive the data, like we sit with the SMA at the second, we get information, he throws a bunch of stuff at us. We just don't keep it, right? We get that data down to the echelons below us. Sometimes it gets stuck. And we'll go out to the field and ask soldiers, hey, how many of XYZ is happening? Or even just what LISCO is. The data isn't flowing sometimes beyond the senior leadership. So if it's data that we have and it's not getting to the low level, even if it's the IG or the EO, what type of complaints, if you want to keep it on a simple level, that information isn't flowing beyond us. And we got to make sure that data that we receive and the whys we're getting suicides, why we're getting bad behaviors, we need to make sure that information is flowing throughout the enterprise and not just get stuck with us. So sometimes we're in our own way, so we got to let that data flow and make sure that it's not just for us, it's for the enterprise, so everyone knows. And that goes to all data.
Roger, can I hit that a little bit from the warfighting perspective and not just, in our Army communications? And the question's really broad, but from a warfighting perspective, I think we need to think about this, because you are going to need to a little bit inundate frontline leaders with data, because we have to think about data as in terms of the communications environment. We're not in a permissive communications environment when we're talking about Russia and China. Warfighters on the front line are not going to have constant communication with their higher headquarters. They're not going to be able to call up and ask for the latest intel picture or get orders of exactly what to do. they're going to need to be making decisions on the front line. And so we are going to need to get data to them. We are going to need to give them capability to collect and utilize data. And again, I go right back to that is why that machine learning piece and the AI piece is going to become so important, because they are going to be inundated with data. And they are going to have to make decisions based on that, and they're going to have to make those decisions fast. And we're talking about, platoon leaders and platoon sergeants potentially having to make those decisions fast, not division commanders. Under the division commander's intent, right? And so we've got to have a way to filter that data to get them what they need from that gigantic pool of information that's available so that they can make decisions fast and on target.
Sometimes it's really funny. It's like we rehearse these questions because you just brought up the next follow-on question. Talk about data filtering and information filtering both ways, though. How do leaders at your level filter information and data down to lower echelons without, they don't need to know everything you need to know. They need to know what they need to know. Maybe a little bit bigger, broader picture. But how do you see we're improving or not, maybe not improving the information coming up as well? Because the feedback from the line units in the dirt, if you will, is as critical as the data you get from higher. So if you would, data filtering. It's another data term.
I'm going to tell you something that's going to make the senior people in this room a little bit uncomfortable.
Good.
We're going to have to trust. Because we're not going to get all the information we want from every one of our units every second of the day. There's no more choke on. Let go. You're going to have to give intent and trust. And that's what Mission Command is.
Yeah, good answer. About right there, aren't we, Roger?
What's that, Desmond?
Shot clock's working.
It says I have 3 minutes, Desmond. Who's in charge right now? You are, SMA. You're in charge. All right. So we're just going to go real quickly through. There is a lot of questions, I tell you, and I appreciate the questions. And those questions won't stop here. We'll actually give them to them, and we'll let them reply to them, and we'll put it up in a chat group, probably for most of you understand the Leading Change forums. We'll put those up in there so the questions don't die here. But there's also, if you have an opportunity and you asked a question and didn't get answered up here, these leaders up here, they're approachable. Just ask them. They'll talk to you. And they'd love to talk to you about it. And they'd love to help understand what you're asking and help you understand what they're trying to do. So with that, I'm going to leave it just real quickly. If you have anything, last comments you would like to make.
Well, just thanks again, SMA and AUSA and team, for allowing me to highlight a little bit of what your theater Army of the Pacific is doing in support of both Indo-PACOM and our Army. It's a very complex mission if you haven't been out there, right? It's one date line, 14 different time zones, 3,000 languages. We got 3 of the big communist countries out there. When you think of the threat, though it's not a limited regional war like we have going on across other places, you can obviously see in the open source the insidious, incremental, and bad behavior of what's happening with the PRC. So just a shout out and a plug. When your marketplace opens up, sign up, come out to the Pacific. We need nothing but talent out here.
Hey, we have Hefeweizen and Italian food, so I'm just saying, right? Now, I'd like to thank every one of you for having the moral courage to stand up and join and fight for your country, right? And support those to our left and right who can't take care of themselves. So thank you for coming in and staying in and not voting with your feet. Joe?
I'll just reiterate my challenge that I put out at the beginning of this, and that's the solution is in your formations. And our soldiers are smart. I have amazing faith in the American soldier, and I would just ask that you empower them and let them help you find the solutions, help us find the solutions to these problems.
Hey, I just thank you for being here. Engaged means showing up, and most of us in this room are leaders, and that walking around leadership is probably the best style of leadership. And everybody here proved that you're engaged. Appreciate you being here. And hey, like I said from the start, it's not your dad or your grandfather's National Guard. We're operationally deployed in not just these 2 theaters, but every theater in the world. And they gave their plugs for the workplace. So, hey, any of your soldiers getting out of the Army, they want to come in to Compo 2 or 3, we'd be glad to have them with all the experience they bring to the fight.
Yeah, like I've always said, don't be the leader on the wall. Don't admire yourself, that picture on the wall. Get out there and make sure you're in the dirt with your soldiers and everything else. We changed our motto for Compo 3, right? It's twice a citizen, combat ready, this will defend. So we're nested with everything. We're nested combat, twice a citizen with our Compo 2, this will defend with our Compo 1. So we're here, we're ready. We are combat ready. Compo 3 is ready to, whenever Freedom 7 hits me up, we're ready to go. We're ready to go. So Compo 3 is here, and we're ready to go. So thanks again for the opportunity to be up here on the panel member.
Leaders, thank you for what you do. As an old soldier, I just incredibly proud of what you do as leaders. And if we can give them a hand.
All right, well done. You guys can head off. A couple things I wrote down before I introduce our next panel member here and we get set for him. Man, I couldn't be more proud of what just happened up there, right? Because, yeah, that's really good stuff. But NCOs are implementing transformation. That was a big piece I took out of that. Big one. I heard the 4 focus areas. I heard warfighting. I heard delivering ready combat formations. I heard continuous transformation. And I heard strengthening the profession from every single one of those briefers. That's important. Just on a proud side of the coin, man, that's your senior enlisted leaders, and that gets me excited. That gets me excited right there. I heard theater armies are not only responsible for, working with our partners and allies and their warfighting functions, but I also heard installations and people. Installations and people. Every one of them have our teammates and their families living forward, and they're responsible for them also. And that is a big deal. That is a giant responsibility. I heard that in there. That matters. A couple COCOMs we didn't mention. Southcom, Northcom. Man, total Army involved in all of those COCOMs also. I know you're paying attention to fires that are happening, storms that are happening, Southwest border, very active in Southcom and Central and South America. I just wanted to mention that. Couple things. Is coding a language. That's pretty good. That's thinking differently. We have to think differently, to CSM Nauman's point. It is the starting place for transforming, is thinking differently. The next individual coming up here is going to talk a little bit about that too. I won't steal, where you at, Brian? I won't steal that coffee cup slogan you gave me, but I know it's going to come out because it's powerful. 39-day models still work for the fight coming. Whoa. Who here's Compo 3 and Compo 2? Now, it's easy to say that. Incredibly difficult to crack the code on that, right? That's tough. But are we thinking that way? We have to think differently. Because believe me, we don't have a solution for that. Whether it's, what we've asked our service members that are in those 2 compos to do, and the relationship they have with their employers, and, oh, by the way, the ability to resource it. Those are all key components to that. So, again, thinking differently doesn't start from, oh, that's going to be hard. That'll never happen. We can't let that stymie us. That's literally what kills critical thinking. So it was interesting to hear that. Strength versus smarts. I kind of my version of what CSM Betty said. But that's real. Like, the best squad focuses on what it specifically focuses on, those skill sets, but they're also writing essays. They're also doing Kim's, like, how many of you remembered half of all those things you were supposed to remember at the end when you got out of the Zodiac? It's okay, you can be honest. Like, you've got to be smart. You've heard me say, my day, it was be harder, not smarter. This day and age, warfighters have to be smarter with grit. That's the warfighter we need in the total Army today. You're never not going to need grit. Transforming contact is informing our TDA and structure decisions. That is a critical piece for everybody to understand. The chief would be upset if I didn't articulate a little bit of that. That is what we're learning from Transforming Contact. Transforming Contact 2.0, he talked about, it's getting ready to come out if you were at the Eisenhower speech. And you'll see that. And those iterations, first with 3 brigades, soon to be with 2 divisions, and all the portions of those divisions, that's going to help us in our force design process to figure out the best solution, because CSM Nauman was right also, the best solution to posture us for the potential fights coming. It'll never be perfect. Just strive for excellence. There's no such thing as perfection. Data literacy. Man, it absolutely needs to be passive, it needs to be AI informed, and it needs to buy leaders back time to make decisions. We're struggling in this right now, but data literacy is key to every warfighter. Every warfighter. You're going to hear more about that. You're going to hear TRADOC talk about it, and you're going to hear operational units talk about it. So I just encourage you, start reading about it. You should be seeing things in line of departure, muddy boots. You're going to see plenty of articles come out about the importance of data literacy. And then again, just so we don't confuse anybody, we all pray for peace, but we prepare for war. Because to not be prepared is not something we want to happen on our watch. Make sense? Okay, this next panel member, I think it's critical. We had 2, where's Jimmy at? We had 2, we were going to have CSM Sellers come up here and talk from the AMC side of the house, but in an effort to be quality over quantity, we're just going to leverage AFC right now because I don't want to rush. I'm tired. I've been 30 years of rushing, and it's quality over quantity. So CSM Hester, come on up here. He's going to come up here, and he's going to tell us what Army Futures Command is doing in support of everything you just heard. And I'm pretty daggone excited about it because it's real. It's not hypothetical. That's one of the key things I want you to walk away with today is this isn't in the theoretical space. We're doing some amazing stuff. He's going to show you something, and then he's going to talk about it. If we have time, we're going to take a couple questions. Mr. Mansker will keep us on track. But the most important thing is that he gets an opportunity to show you what AFC is doing to support those theater armies, corps, and divisions and brigades. CSM Hester.
Okay, thanks, SMA. So let me start off by saying thanks to AUSA first. And this video is probably not going to be as powerful as the one the SMA showed, but we're going to start off with a quick video. It's a loud video.
The Army of the future is not just something we imagine. It is something we create. And we are preparing now for the challenges of tomorrow's battlefield. These challenges will include a need to navigate, communicate, and dominate across all domains. But our Army's ability to tackle new obstacles in the future will depend on what it has always depended on: the strength, skill, knowledge, and adaptability of the best soldiers in the world. And the best soldiers deserve the best equipment. One of our newest Army transformation efforts in this area is the development of Human-Machine Integrated Formations, or HMIF. Optimizing the right combination of humans and machines will increase lethality, survivability, and mobility of formations. Last year, this was a concept. Today, it is a reality. Human-machine integrated formations combine the adaptability and intuition of humans with the precision and speed of state-of-the-art machines, all while ensuring humans remain responsible for critical decision-making on the battlefield. The Army should never again trade blood for first contact with the enemy. Transforming our use of artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation will be imperative in reducing risk, physical, and cognitive demand to soldiers. We can offload the repetitive, dirty, and dangerous tasks to machines and let the soldiers do what they do best. Army Futures Command is proud to be a part of the dedicated team building the foundation of a next-generation Army and combined force, because tomorrow is worth protecting.
Okay, thanks, Katie, for putting that together. That was fantastic. So I think I'd like to just start off by saying, you as non-commissioned officers in the room, we own transformation, okay? Now, my boss, with the Chief's 4 priorities, continuous transformation, he owns that for the Army, just like TJ owns readiness, just like, Ray owns professionalizing the Army, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's really important for this group of people to acknowledge and realize that transformation and human-machine integrated formations starts with people. It starts with formations. Formations in our Army are made up of people first, and then we pile material on top of that to be able to do the things that we must do, the dirty, nasty things that machines can do better than us. So, the SMA stole a couple of, my one-liners, like praying for peace and, being prepared for war. But let me just start off by saying we don't have a tech problem in our Army. We have a tech adoption problem in our Army. And we've got a lot of units out in our formations that are innovating at the tactical level, and the best innovation starts at the tactical level. But it is realized across the enterprise at the enterprise level. So when General Rainey and I, do a little battlefield circulation, and we end up in places like Lightning Lab and the Marne Innovation Cell, we're excited to see that stuff. But it's a lot of local solutions, which is fantastic. What we're trying to do is make sure we can get to enterprise solutions for the entire Army. And I hate handheld mics, by the way. So this is very simple. This is, transformation and contact right here. 3 phases of transformation and contact, or really 3 phases of continuous transformation. It's on. Am I doing both? Okay. All right. So 3 phases of continuous transformation across our Army. The first one is transformation and contact, which we're going to talk about. That's putting things in our formation in 0 to 24 months. Things that are out there, they may only be 70% solutions right now, but we're going to put them in our formations. We're going to allow our soldiers to use those things in our formations and learn and innovate, and then come back to us through project convergence and through continuous transformation to say, hey, these are the things in our formations that work. We don't need to wait around for us to do 10 years of testing, even though we might do that with like a tank or a helicopter. But we got to get these things in your formations, let you use them, break them, tell us how they work, tell us how they don't work. So we're talking about 0 to 24 months. A lot of UAS, counter UAS stuff that's happening in our formations right now. A lot of, we talked about data literacy and really it's how do we collect data, how do we analyze data, and then how do we use that data for a decision, right? And we're working really hard on that with our C2 Next. And I think General Rainey just announced recently we're going to take the network CFT and we're going to turn it into command and control CFT. So we're going to get after that. So you got all the things that are coming into your formations in 0 to 24 months, transformation and contact. Deliberate transformation, 6 years ago when they stood up AFC, the Army said, we need some modernization priorities. They developed 6 of them. Those 6 are still here today. 2 chiefs, 2 secretaries, 2 AFC commanders, the multiple ACOM commanders. We're sticking with deliberate transformation connected to those 6 modernization priorities. And then concept-driven transformation. Through our future studies program, we are running repetition after repetition after repetition based on concept-required capabilities to determine what it is that we need in 2030 and 2040. So I really believe the Army has always done this. We're talking about transforming for a complex world. We've always done this. We've just hyper-focused on it right now, the same way we were with the Big Five in the early 80s. Next slide. Okay, so just really quickly, I want to talk about HMI, and it really is about formations. Now, we're doing persistent experimentation across these formations. We're doing it in places like PCC 5 as an example, but Avenger Triad, Pacific Pathways. We put Red Sands in CENTCOM. These are all exercises that the theaters do that we enable by putting these types of items into those formations so we can get after the best formations, the most lethal formations, and the most protected formations. So, these are just a couple of the things that you're going to see in HMIF right here on the slide for you today. And I'm happy to talk about these in more context. But really, a lot of what I could have talked about, my partners that were up here before I got up on the stage talked a lot about it. So what I really want to focus on, go to the next slide really quickly. Okay, SRR, ISV, LASSO, ITN, STEED, and SMET. They're in our 3 tick brigades right now. And we're experimenting, and our soldiers are experimenting, and we're going to learn a lot from just these 6 capabilities that we've put in our formations really in the last 24 months. Okay, I'm done because I want to take questions. Roger, are you doing questions?
Go ahead, Roger. We got time for a couple.
Yeah, sure. I think I can read. You want to moderate just me? Somebody needs to. Okay, so how can we ensure soldiers are still developing critical decision-making skills rather than over-relying on robotic systems? I think it's simply what the SMA says and what we all say. You got to be brilliant at the basics first, all right? Before we can do anything sexy, my words, we got to do the nitty-gritty, dirty things that we're required to do. We got to shoot, move, communicate, survive on the battlefield. And then as importantly, as non-commissioned officers and soldiers, we have to be experts at our military occupational specialty, all right? That's where this all begins. If we don't have that platform for us to continue to develop off of, we're not going to be in the place that we really need to be. So, and then robotics. So this is an interesting thing. There are 350,000 high school students that are in robotics clubs in the United States. 350,000. And what do we have, like 1.2 million in our Army? And in our Army, I'm going to guess that we have at least 100,000 young men and young women that are interested in a robot. So let's put them in their formations and let's let them use them. They're great with Xbox controllers. We watch them all the time do amazing things with a simple Xbox controller. And we add a robot to it. Our challenge really is how do we scale that where it's like not one-to-one, not one human to one robot. It's one human to multiple robots in our formations doing the heavy lifting, doing the dangerous things. At Project Convergence, where are our engineers at in here? All right. So how do we get a MIC-LIC to the breach right now? Back of a 113 with soldiers inside it, right? So at Project Convergence, we put a MIC-LIC on an SMET, went to the breach, shot the MIC-LIC, no soldiers had to be in contact with the enemy. And candidly, one of the most dangerous things that we do. So heavy lifting, dirty, nasty work, that's where our robots are going to be most effective. All right. How do we gather and incorporate feedback from soldiers implementing new technologies now? We do that through soldier-centered design. So every item of equipment that comes out of our enterprise that goes to your formation gets tested rigorously. And in those tests, we use soldiers from your formations. And they give us feedback with our scientists and our engineers so that we make sure the knobs are on the right side, the buttons are on the right side. It provides the capability that we need it to provide, whether it's lethality or whether it's communications or whether it's, NVDs, whatever it is. Soldier-centered design is how we get the feedback from our formations. I don't like any of these questions. Who wrote these questions? No, actually, we did. No, I'm just joking. You guys are terrible. You're sleeping on me. Okay, let's take some questions from the audience.
Yeah.
What are we looking at as an Army for increasing our lethality at night, specifically?
Okay, that's a great question, SMA. So it matters to me too. So obviously we're working really hard on IVAS, right? Integrated Visual Augmentation System. There candidly are some challenges with IVAS, but again we're working through that. That's one of the strategies we have. We're going to go to a next NVD Next, which is going to be a dual technology NVD that we're going to get to, that's going to replace all of our PVS 7s, PVS 14s that are in our formation. We're moving out really quickly on that. There's a lot of things that are out there, off the shelf already that we can look to put into our formations to get after this problem. The fire control system on the next generation squad weapon system incorporates a lot of the things that we need to be able to do at night. It's got a laser, it's got a light, it's all integrated into one thing, so we don't have the Frankenstein weapon system that we're used to seeing our soldiers carry. So I think that's going to really increase our lethality, and it's going to offer the opportunity for us to see, categorize the target, and engage the target more lethally. And then of course we've got ENVGB, which is a very capable night vision system that are out there in a number of our formations right now that's really fantastic. The real thing, not to go down this path with you, but all of those things take power, and power is a huge problem as it applies to night vision capability. And also as it applies to the other lethal things that we're trying to do at the squad level, platoon level, company level. So power is a big consideration with that. But yeah, ENVGB is out there. It's great. IVAS is working. I think we have the next touch point for IVAS, I believe, is in January. We'll get some good feedback from that, and then we'll go back to Microsoft and say, hey, we got to make this better. Yes, ma'am.
The biggest area of spend right now is in biometrics and medical spending. Can you talk a little bit about what Army Futures Command is doing in terms of biomedical, what is on the horizon, and what is the most promising technology coming out in that area?
Yeah, that's a super tough question that I was not prepared for. So, I mean, obviously we got our Medical Research and Development Command that's doing a lot of work in that space. We've got our medical capabilities development that's part of our Future Concept Center. Can I get back with you on that so I make sure that I'm answering your question the right way? I don't want to stand up here and pontificate on something I'm really not prepared to talk about.
Perfect. All right, close it out. Give him a round of applause.
Okay. All right. It is an important one, though, and I appreciate you bringing it up. Protection, survivability. It's a real thing. Where's my CBRN teammates in here? Yeah. Oh, funny that, you sitting right next to her. Did you put her up to that question? You should have, because it was a good one. So we were out at Fort Leonard Wood. Who was out at Fort Leonard Wood at the Maneuver Protection Conference? Yeah, I was out there. We talked quite a bit about this because it's a real thing. These adversaries that we're focused on, this is real. And having spent a lot of my career in MOP 4 with rebreathers on, fighting in that environment and not being informed about that, to your point, it's not a good place to be as a leader when you're responsible for troopers. So we'll get back with you on that one and we'll all get smarter. Hey, a couple things I heard from CSM Hester that I think we ought to think about, and then we're closing out. Tech adoption problem. That's really important. Why do you think that is? And I'll answer it, but I want you to think from that mindset. What's causing that, right? I think, and we are getting better. I know I can be a half-empty guy all the time. We are getting better, but fear of failure, and how does that look with my performance? Like you gotta take things, you gotta be willing to buy them, you gotta be willing to spend your budget on them, and then you gotta be willing to play with them and fail and learn. And we're not always really good with that. We aren't. I mean, it's okay. I'll admit it for us. We're getting better, though. And then trust, to me, is the second one. Is like, do you trust it to do what a human used to do? Because in the end, when the microphone doesn't work, where do my patients go? Do I just relax and say, I'll give them a few minutes to fix it? And I mean, I know SMA Daly is the most patient man on the earth. Like, I get frustrated. When tech doesn't work, I get frustrated. So there's a trust issue there. Those are the two things I think are associated with an adoption problem. And so, but if we don't fail faster and learn faster, we're never going to gain any trust in anything that CSM Hester was talking about. So that's one piece there. Local solution versus institutional solutions. That's a big deal. We're spending a ton of money and a ton of resources and relearning lessons and rebuying the same things. And so we had to figure out how to harness all that. And AFC is the right place for that.
Hey, can I just add one thing on that real quick, SMA? So two things. Army Innovation Network, which is like your lieutenant colonel, master sergeant, sergeant first class level that happens every month. It's run by AAL. It's a really great place to see what's happening innovation-wise at the tactical level. And then the Army Innovation Forum, which is run by General Hodney at the Future Concepts Center, which is a GO-nominative sergeant major level forum to talk about innovation and tech adoption and the things that we're working on across the formation. And that's a quarterly event that we've run about twice at this point, which is really fantastic.
And we're starting. Yeah.
Is where we can plug in, where you can plug in and get your information to your lab at your local level, and they can start working on products. And hopefully they come to a requirement.
Yeah, well, I can mark that off my list right now because that's Sergeant Major Rob Haney. So he's the counterpart to Futures Command with Lieutenant General Collins at ASALT. And we are getting much better at what CSM Betty was kind of talking about, which is getting the information back down. Because it is a two-way street. Like, we're asking you for all of it. I want to learn from you. And then you're like, hey, man, I taught you. I gave you all that stuff. What'd you do with it? And so we are getting better on that. All right, 310, TIC. You heard a lot about TIC, transformation in contact. Like, I'm literally going with 310 to go live in the dirt out of a rucksack in January in Germany. To go get some firsthand experience. If I can do it, somebody set it up here. Leaders, what do leaders do best? Like, find the time, make the time, get out there with your soldiers, get the ground truth. And then the last thing I'll lead you with, and then we're closing this out. I got one other thing I want you to watch. Gucci kit, my words. Gucci kit in the hands of a unit not brilliant at the basics is just going to equip the adversary with Gucci kit. And we're not in the business of giving the adversary any of our Gucci kit. None of this replaces being brilliant at the basics. Now, I will admit there's potentially some new basics getting added to the list, especially when you talk about what we normally talk of the basics. Is there a time when E3B has a UAS in it? I don't know. We're headed down that path, though, aren't we there, CSM Daily? So the basics may be evolving, but there's some basics that are never going away. And I want us to really remember that. Kit and tech is not going to replace the responsibility we have as non-commissioned officers to come ready and be brilliant at the basics. And then all that stuff CSM Hester's talking about will make us twice as lethal. All right, give everybody a round of applause. It's a busy 3 days. There's a lot going on. I know you're probably going to have to go reflect on everything that's happened. But I want you to watch this as we all walk out of here. Kind of wait till it's over. I think it's like 2 minutes long. Kind of get our minds right. And then let's go get after it.